Ecstasy Made Visible explores a connection between two artists separated by more than 3 centuries. At first glance, they might seem worlds apart. Gian Lorenzo Bernini worked in the 17th century Rome, sculpting marble for popes and cardinals, while Carolee Schneemann worked with bodies, movement, gender, and art supplies in the art scene of the 1960s. Both were consummate theatrical performance artists working in sacred spaces. They both explored how the human body can become a threshold between ecstatic spiritual experience and material sensation, presenting the body simultaneously as a vessel and an event. He turned stone to flesh, she dispensed with the stone and just worked with the flesh. Carolee Schneemann was an experimental feminist artist whose work included painting, film, performance, installation, and writing. Born in Fox Chase, Philadelphia in 1939, although a birth certificate indicates that she was born in 1934, her mother was a homemaker and her father a country doctor. I began to draw before I could speak and never stopped drawing. I ran away from home when I was 15, she said. Carolee was my first art teacher. I was 16 and attending a community center in Rego Park, Queens, New York, that offered painting classes after school. It was 1964. She was either 25 or 30 years old, and she had just returned from Paris, where she had produced and performed Meet Joy, a seminal work that she referred to as kinetic theater. At the Paris premiere, in response to the orgiastic Dionysian rite, a man from the audience stripped, joined the performers, and started to strangle Schneemann violently before being subdued by audience members. Pat Steer once said that Carolee's main problem in the male-dominated art world was that she was too beautiful. She was beautiful. When I met Carolee, she looked like she had just arrived from another planet, tall and elegant with a mass of wavy hair, layers of colorful clothing, and lots of beads and bracelets. I idolized her. She invited me to a happening she was producing at the Judson Memorial Church in Greenwich Village. I had no idea what a happening was. I took the subway downtown and pushed my way through a large crowd already gathered outside the church. The Judson was a pivotal 1960s hub for avant-garde art, hosting radical Fluxus performances and happenings that took place directly within the church space rather than on a traditional stage. According to Schneemann, the distinction between Fluxus and happenings is very precise. Happenings is messy, sensuous, kinetic, emotion in space. Fluxus was initially more discreet. It objected to personality, to nudity, to self-display, to elements that the founder of Fluxus, George Maciunas, called operatic. Happenings came through Oldenburg, Dine, Capro, and John Cage, and I felt it was more painterly, more expressionistic than Fluxus, and more in line with what I was working towards. Fluxus founder, George Maciunas, objected to the self-display and nudity that defined her art. He famously criticized her work as being neo-Baroque. Awarded a full scholarship to Bard at the age of 16, she majored in poetry and philosophy in addition to painting. She suggested to her art professor that Neolithic fertility figurines might have been crafted by women for themselves, or that perhaps the Villa of the Mysteries in Pompeii could have been painted by women. Her professor was shocked and annoyed, saying that there was absolutely no authority to support such ideas. At this time, she was painting full-frontal nudes of her boyfriend, James Tenney, the composer, and the male faculty were outraged. When she painted a self-portrait of herself in the nude, with her legs splayed apart, she was suspended from Bard for moral turpitude. She transferred to Columbia University and later earned an MFA from the University of Illinois. Schneemann began her career as a painter, saying, "I'm a painter. I'm still a painter, and I will die a painter. Everything that I have developed has to do with extending visual principles off of the canvas. I wanted my actual body to be combined with the work as an integral material for art making. As a result, I exposed and confronted a range of cultural taboos and repressive morals of the time. I wanted to get that nude off the canvas." She was an early and fierce proponent of the shift away from using the pronouns he and him to mean all people, and there are many books in her library with he or his crossed out and replaced with she and her. She preferred her term art historical without the H so as to reject the his in history. Meet Joy, now in the permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art in New York, was conceived and first performed in May of 1964 in Paris. In her words, "Paris is affecting me. There is so much sensuality. Outside my window there are fish sellers yelling, 'Voilà, poisson frais,' and it was such an incredible sound, so I decided to incorporate it into my music for this performance. Cheap, cheap fish, cheap sausages, cheap chickens." I had my pass from Carolee, and I pushed my way through the mob into the sanctuary, standing room only. The floor of the altar was covered in a large sheet of plastic. The music was loud, popular songs of the early 1960s mixed with spoken text by Carolee. Her voice was overlaid with Little Richard singing, "Tutti Frutti." Two performers standing on a balcony overlooking the scene threw crumpled balls of white paper onto the stage. 8 women and men danced onto the stage wearing bikinis. They had been performing or actioning off stage for an hour, invisible to the audience. Meet Joy is actually the second act of this work. On the stage, the actors collapsed into clusters of writhing human flesh, rubbing one another with paint, feathers, paper, raw chickens, raw sausages, and raw fish. Schneemann was using a vocabulary of movement and dimension on the stage, using the props that are found in any painter's studio: paintbrushes, plastic sheets, buckets of paint, paper, and food. In Carolee's words, "For a time, I was a chicken farmer in Pennsylvania. I had to slaughter 17 chickens every Friday at a local farm. It was an entrancing experience. I had my own chopping block and my own little axe, and then I steamed them, plucked them, eviscerated them. I loved to go inside and get the warm heart, the little tiny eggs, the liver, and the gizzard." The smell of rotting fish and meat filled the entire church. Photographs now show us the actors' faces, eyes closed, laughing, screaming, expressing pain and disgust, as well as sensuality, abandon, joy, and ecstasy. She had transformed the human body itself into the medium of art. Marcel Duchamp called Meet Joy the messiest work of art France had ever seen. I recall thinking, what the hell? This is art? I guess I'll never be an artist. I thought of Meet Joy as an erotic ritual for my starved culture, stated Schneemann, a celebration of flesh as a creative material. The culture was starved because sensuality was confused with pornography instead of a worship of the body. We have to remind ourselves that through the 60s, only men maintained creative authority. Women were muses, partners. As a woman, I crossed the line between proper behavior and improper behavior that the patriarchal art culture had kept in place for centuries. Her artistic stance received tremendous resistance from outraged conservatives as well as many artists. Upon its presentation to the public, art critics described the piece as lewd, narcissistic, and pornographic. The precursor to Meet Joy was Schneemann's 1963 iBody, 36 transformative actions for camera created in her loft studio. She constructed an installation of rhythmic color walls, broken mirrors, lights, moving umbrellas, and motorized parts. I covered myself in paint, grease, chalk, ropes, plastic, and established my body as visual territory, as an extension of my painting. Her most famous solo political performance was the 1975 interior scroll. In East Hampton, New York, at the Women Here and Now exhibition, Schneemann climbed onto a table wearing only a white sheet and an apron. She began to read from her book, Cézanne, She Was a Great Painter. She dropped the sheet and started painting mud onto her body while enacting a series of ritualistic poses before discarding the apron. Adopting a squatting stance, she began to pull a rolled-up scroll from her vagina and read it out loud to her mesmerized audience. Her text, in a scroll format, addressed the erasure of women's artistic agency and asserted the female body as a source of knowledge. At the time, people believed that the text of the scroll was addressed to her male partner. Actually, it was addressed to a woman, American art historian Annette Michelson, who, according to Schneemann, refused to watch her films. Her work has been the subject of numerous publications, exhibitions, and retrospectives, most recently as Carolee Schneemann, Body Politics, at the Barbican Art Gallery in London in 2022. She was the recipient of the Golden Lion for Lifetime Achievement at the Venice Biennale in 2017. Her comment upon receiving this prestigious award was, quote, "It made me very depressed and confused. I'm used to working with neglect and misunderstanding, so it was really very challenging." In the last years before her death in 2019, after a 6-decade career, Schneemann had finally overcome decades of rejection and neglect to receive the art world's recognition and adulation. Developed in the late 17th century, the Baroque style celebrated the ornate and featured dramatic lighting, bold realism, and dynamic movement in order to evoke emotion. The quintessential Renaissance man Gian Lorenzo Bernini was born in Naples in 1598 and died in Rome in 1680 at the age of 81. Over his long career, he designed and created over 113 artworks, 3 massive churches, 4 major iconic fountains, 3 huge squares, more than 10 major architectural projects in Rome, and some of the most remarkable sculptures ever carved from marble. His father, Pietro Bernini, a sculptor, recognized his son's prodigious talent early on and moved the family to Rome so that the young artist could develop his skills. Bernini quickly gained powerful patrons and was called the Michelangelo of his century. Pope Urban VIII reportedly told him, "You are made for Rome, and Rome was made for you." One of Bernini's first major commissions came in 1619 at the age of 21, when Cardinal Borghese, his patron, asked the young artist to create a series of sculptures for his Roman villa. Among them is the extraordinary sculpture titled The Rape of Proserpina or Persephone. Pluto abducts Proserpina and is about to take her to his underworld. Bernini captures the action of a powerful god lifting a struggling, terrified Proserpina, her body twisted in desperate resistance. Among the notable details of this sculpture are the tears on her cheek and the impression of Pluto's fingers digging into her thigh and hip. The softness of Carrara marble enabled Bernini, quote, to give stone the appearance of flesh, unquote. St. Peter's Basilica, considered to be the largest church in the world, can seat 20,000 people. The visual centerpiece situated over the tomb of St. Peter is the baldacchino, designed by Bernini. Installed in 1633, it is centered under the Great Dome, rises 100 feet, weighs 63 tons, and cost $8 million in today's dollars. This gazebo-like structure claims to be the largest piece of gilded cast bronze in the world. Rome has over 1,000 churches, but there is one that is particularly significant in Bernini's oeuvre. Completed in 1626, the modest Carmelite church of Santa Maria della Vittoria has a floor plan based on a Latin cross, with a short nave and 3 small side chapels. Visitors note that this very small, 7,000 square foot church can feel crowded with only 30 people in it. On a visit to Rome, I remember entering the church and being shocked by the intense ornamentation, Baroque style on acid. It looked to me like a discount warehouse for marble samples. Every square inch of the church is covered with colored patterned marble, stucco, frescoes, paintings, and sculptures. The marble walls are riveted with precious marbles. All this marble was collected from the existing 5 city-states that formed Italy at that time, symbolically fitting the entire country into this little church. The altar was designed by Bernini. Commissioned by Cardinal Federico Cornaro in 1647 as his family memorial and funeral burial chapel, this shallow space cost the equivalent of $1.2 million in today's dollars and took 5 years to construct. Bernini designed this chapel as if it were a painting, to be viewed from a central perspective in order to create a theatrical and sensual experience for the viewer. The centerpiece of this stage is Bernini's life-size sculpture, carved from a single block of Carrara marble, the Ecstasy of St. Teresa of Avila. She appears to float on a cloud bed, accompanied by an angel with a golden arrow in his hand. Bernini considered this sculpture to be his most magnificent and accomplished. A fan-shaped crepuscular array of gilded stucco rods radiate down from inside a vaulted canopy directly above the figures. A fresco of cherubs decorates the canopy, representing heaven, and above it, it obscures a hidden source of light. In her mystical autobiography, written at the age of 55, Saint Teresa had a vision and described an angel sent by God who appeared before her and pierced her heart with an arrow of divine love. She wrote that this ecstatic experience filled her with a deep, pleasurable pain that she equated with the love of God. Bernini's tableau arrests the scene of Saint Teresa's transverberation, or piercing of the heart, at its most dramatic moment. Saint Teresa's body is portrayed as writhing, her mouth is open, and the expression on her face is, indeed, that mixture of pleasure and pain. The angelic figure, resembling Cupid, has delicately pulled Teresa's robe away from her body. He has just finished piercing her heart and has removed the golden arrow, looking as if he will pierce her again. She is in a swooning, ecstatic state, as indicated by her languid hand and barefoot peeking out from under her robe. Bernini made the abstract concept of divine love relatable to the viewer by transforming a woman's private mystical experience into a public theatrical event. Bernini's contemporaries accused him of blasphemy, lashing out at his depiction of a saint, claiming that, quote, "Our Immaculate Virgin has not only been swept into heavenly ecstasy, but also dragged through the filth and reduced to a Venus degraded into prostitution." Bernini had crossed a line of decency in a church that no previous artist had dared to cross. A French artist commented, "If that is divine love, then I know just what it is." On either side of this miniature stage set, two operatic balconies contained the sculpted representations of the Coronaro patriarchs watching the saint having her ecstasy. The balcony on the left has a half-hidden figure reputed to be a self-portrait by Bernini. As if this wasn't enough, inside the vault and hidden from view, Bernini put in an oculus or skylight so that every year, on October 15th, St. Teresa's holy day, the sun would shine directly down onto the golden rods and illuminate the stage while simultaneously backlighting the scene. For a few moments, a divine light illuminates the pure white marble, and St. Teresa's body becomes translucent. Bernini's masterful manipulation of light and stone in art history terms is referred to as vive carne, bringing flesh to life, or roughly translated as living meat, meat joy. The Baroque impulse toward theatricality, sensuality, and emotional intensity did not end in the 17th century. It resurfaces across history, reemerging in the 20th century avant-garde, where the work of Carolee Schneemann and Gian Lorenzo Bernini converge around a shared conviction: the body as the center of experience and the place where ecstasy becomes visible.